Oh boy, did the Minnesota Wild's defense get caved in against the Toronto Maple Leafs. We'll talk about that, plus Marco Rossi's first career NHL goal on today's Locked On Wild postcast.
You're Locked On Wild, your daily podcast on the Minnesota Wild. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, this is Brandon Duhaime, and this is Locked On Wild.
Welcome into tonight's Locked On Wild postcast. The Minnesota Wild fall by a score of 7-4 to the Toronto Maple Leafs. Man, oh man, was that something to watch. Auston Matthews got another hat trick, and the Wilds got this to a 4-3 game going into the third period before things absolutely fell apart. And I want to, just as we get going, go to the keys to the game for today. We see here slowing down the pace. That was not achieved. Keeping the front of the net clean. That was not achieved. And the Minnesota Wild's top six needed to match what Toronto was doing. And that was not achieved. Now, granted, it's Auston Matthews. You're going to have a hard time keeping up with him in a scoring, in a track meet. This hockey game was a track meet, but the offense wasn't the problem. The Minnesota Wild's offense had opportunities early on in that third period to tie the game. And had they been able to continue to chip away, they very likely would have. But the defense was abysmal in this one. Too many instances in which Maple Leafs players were just allowed to glide to the front of the net and score point blank. All of it, I think, perfectly summarized by the William Nylander goal, in which John Merrill is basically gliding backwards while Nylander comes up the right side of the zone untouched. And he slides in and he tucks one past Filip Gustavsson. You can't hang your goalie out to dry like that. And Gustavsson, not as sharp as he was against the Florida Panthers, but also had no help defensively in this one. Auston Matthews had one of his goals about 10 feet away from the net, just completely uncovered. The Wild were getting set defensively, just left the front of the net wide open. And that just was the theme of the night. And it's a shame because we continue to see really good things from Brock Faber. I thought, for what it's worth, the pairing of Brock Faber and Jonas Brodin continues to play really well. But that may have been one of the worst games that Jake Middleton played in a Wild uniform. And Alex Goligoski, I mean, what do you say? That pairing and then the Merrill-Addison pairing was just not good in this one tonight. And that's why the Wilds lose. And obviously there are bigger concerns, as we'll try to keep an eye on here as the night unfolds. It's just, you may have now an injury to deal with to Matt Boldy, as he left with about 9 minutes to play in the third period. But if you are going to not have the services of Jared Spurgeon at your disposal, that's a huge loss, yes, but you have to have a plan in place for how to cover the ground that he does when he's out there on the ice. This is some of the same stuff that we saw last season at the beginning of the year. Just wide open area right in front of the net. And I think that's the part that really frosts me the most, is that is the one area where it is easiest to score on the ice, is right in front of the net. And there were just countless instances in which that portion of the net was wide open. And it's frustrating. But again, as has been pointed out on Twitter, it's game 2 of the season. Jared Spurgeon will be back. But in the meantime, Denny was right. There are concerns about this Wild defense in the absence of Jared Spurgeon, and probably even beyond that, because you had 3 guys out there that were essentially unplayable. And, Jake Middleton, add him in as a 4th tonight, just it did not have it. Those bottom 2 pairings did not have it at any point here tonight. It overshadows another really, really good game for Marco Rossi. We finally saw him score his first career NHL goal. Nearly had another. Marco Rossi was probably the best player out there on the ice for the Minnesota Wild tonight. Let that sink in. And it's not because the rest of the team played terribly by any measure. It's just that Rossi was that good out there tonight. Nearly had a second goal, mixing it up with Toronto players. Again, it just looks like a fundamentally different player out there on the ice than what we saw last year before he was sent back down to Iowa. So extremely happy for Rossi to pick up his first career NHL goal, and just really glad that he continues to have a sensational start to the season here for the Wild. Brock Faber again played well. He had another point here this evening, and obviously you get the first goal of the season for Ryan Hartman, first goal of the season for Brandon Duhaime, and the first goal of the season for Matt Boldy. So even while the defense was getting shredded up in a cheese grater all night, there still were positives to pull from this game, and it's something that is going to have to be addressed as the games go on. And from the sounds of it, Dean Evason was pretty critical of the decor for the Wild. As Michael Russo tweets out, Evason is critical as he's ever been on the D, and especially Goligoski on the third period penalty. Says Brock Faber can't be their best D-man every night with Spurgeon out. That's another thing too, and I don't necessarily put... It's a weird situation for Goligoski because he was trying to make a point that Ryan Reeves was doing Ryan Reevesy things and should probably have been called for a penalty on at least one of those occasions. But you got to know where you're at. You got to know the situation on the ice. The Toronto power play was doing damage to the Wild's penalty kill. And so he says something to the official to the effect of, you got to call one. And he gets an unsportsmanlike, and I believe the Maple Leafs scored almost immediately after that. It's something that can't happen. For a veteran, you gotta find a better way to get that message across. And you can't put the team in a situation like that to where they, end up getting put behind the 8 ball. So a rough one tonight, to say the least. But again, some positives to pull. Marco Rossi, Brock Faber continue to look good. I thought the top line had some opportunities to score, just not quite operating at 100%. Kaprizov had a couple of really good opportunities that he just wasn't able to connect on. And so, again, it's a game that the Wild were in through 2 periods, just could not close it out. And there's some work to do on the defensive side of the puck. So a lot to talk about in that regard, and we'll continue to talk about that more here as we go throughout the rest of the show. But I want to hear from you. So start firing up those comments if you have them, and we will hear your thoughts on what we saw tonight as the Minnesota Wild drop to 1-1 on the season after a 7-4 loss to the Toronto Maple Leafs. More of the Locked on Wild postcast coming up after this. Tonight's Locked on Wild postcast is brought to you by Jace Medical. Everyone should be empowered to care for themselves and their loved ones during the unexpected. That's where Jace Medical comes in, and that is why Jace Medical offers the Jace case. The Jace case provides 5 life-saving antibiotics for emergency use and gives you peace of mind so that you're not just hoping that you have access to medication in an emergency. It's in a nice, tidy, neat compartment you can put wherever you want so that when disaster strikes, you know exactly where it is and you know that you have what you need depending on the situation. Jace Medical makes sure that you have the medication in hand. And Jace Medical is simple. They handle everything from the online evaluation to licensed pharmacy medication delivery and ongoing consultation and care. Don't get caught unprepared. Head to jacemedical.com today. And if you do, and you use the promo code LOCKEDON at checkout, you can get $20 off of these life-saving antibiotics today. Again, that's code LOCKEDON at checkout for $20 off of these life-saving antibiotics from Jace Medical. That's JASE medical.com. Welcome back to tonight's Locked On Wild postcast. The Minnesota Wilds lose by a score of 7-4 here tonight to fall to 1-1 on the season. We're going to get to your comments here on tonight's show. Let me know what you thought, what you liked, what you didn't like. I have a feeling a lot of it's going to be on the defense. But as Tracy mentions, Evason explicitly calling out Goligoski during the post-game press conference. I don't know what will be in store for Tuesday's game against the Montreal Canadiens, but as I tweeted out tonight, I would love to see Dakota Mermis get an opportunity. Since he's with the team on the trip, I would love to see him get an opportunity to get in there and get a chance to play on Tuesday against the Canadiens. Canadiens are not the Toronto Maple Leafs, but it's a young team, and it is a team that, if given the same number of opportunities in front of the net as were given to the Toronto Maple Leafs tonight, it's a team that has players that are skilled enough to be able to take advantage of said opportunities. So I'd like to see that. And as Russo tweeted during the game as well, it looked like Bob Woods was tweaking the D pairings at various points. And so the fact that at least was attempted during the game is a sign that hopefully there will be some other changes looked at for the team heading into Tuesday. But again, this all comes down to this being the group of 7 that came into the season. And with veterans, what you see is most largely what you get. You don't have, as you do with rookie players, you don't have these huge swings where all of a sudden a guy has a career renaissance for the most part. What you see is what you get. And what we saw is just a lot of what we saw last year too. And I just continue to go back to that Nylander goal. And I know you're trying to ensure that there's still room between you and the goalie to make sure that they don't get by you for a full breakaway goal. But come on, you've got to at least get some kind of, I don't know, body on a guy, especially with the skills that Nylander has. And Merrill just is gliding back to the net. That was just a microcosm of the issues all night by the Wild D-Corps. As Gary notes, Spurgeon cannot come back soon enough. A million billion % accurate in that regard. This team misses Jared Spurgeon, not only for what he does himself, but it slots everybody back down into a more normal spot in the lineup. And then you have one pairing that you're kind of minute controlling as opposed to 2 pairings that you're having to worry about as the game goes on. So by and large, again, defense, the problem, as it looks like, was just waiting to kind of see if there was any additional updates in the case of Matt Boldy. But as Michael Russo tweets out, Dean Evason with no update on Boldy. He got hit into the boards, again, with about 9 minutes to play in the third period. Did not return. He was in some discomfort. with what was cited as likely an upper body injury. So we'll wait and see if we have any update on that. Of course, Alex McLetty and I will discuss it for Monday's episode. And if there is any news on that throughout the day tomorrow, while I'm just sitting around watching the NFL all day, as one typically does on Sundays, then we'll get some breaking news in there as well as to how that will impact the team. And the unfortunate part about it too is, let's say Matt Boldy's out, is you get the wonderful 11-7 lineup, which is just something I can not negatively endorse enough. Just because they're on the road and you don't really have anybody that you can get into town quick enough to be able to help out. So it's likely if Boldy misses time that we're going to get an 11-7. And we'll see. But hopefully that's not a huge buzzkill to the start of the season. Again, just a shout out to Marco Rossi for picking up his first career NHL goal here tonight. I can't say enough, and I'm sure a lot of you have noticed it too. Can't say enough how good Rossi has looked at the start of this season, doing the things that he was not doing last year. But again, it's the confidence for me that really makes him stick out. He got his first career NHL goal off of the rebounded shot that he batted out of the air. But there was an instance in which Jonas Brodin had the puck on the far side of the zone. Rossi set up at the top. He was ready to shoot it. He knew Brodin was going to pass it to him for the shot, and he unleashed a laser. Now, it didn't go in, but he unleashed a laser, showing that he has confidence in his shot, and he wanted the opportunity to shoot it. And then later in the game, he had that partial breakaway, which he chipped at Samsonov. Samsonov had a little trouble with it, and could have very likely had a second goal there if Samsonov struggled. Maybe if he went top shelf, he could have got a second one in. But again, main point is that Rossi looks like he's going to stay this time. The key, as Tracy mentions, Rossi looks like he's arrived as long as he keeps it going. That's the key for Rossi, is to use this early start to springboard him the rest of the season. And so pedal to the metal for Marco Rossi. Just really glad to see him succeeding here in the early part of this season. That is, I think, going to wrap it up for tonight's Locked On Wild postcast. Again, thank you to everybody for joining the show. Michael noting that Mitch Marner using Addison as a pylon. Yeah, that's never a recipe for a good time if you are a opposing player and Mitch Marner is going to work. But again, further speaks to just the defensive issues that this team had all night. Make sure that you follow along with Locked On Wild for content similar to this with our intermission reports, as well as live post games. We'll be rolling out full pregame previews as well. So make sure to stay tuned for all of that. Make sure you subscribe and turn notifications on your favorite podcast platforms and on YouTube, so you don't miss out on any of Locked On Wild's coverage throughout the rest of the season. Locked On Wild is keeping you up to date with news and information on the Minnesota Wild, with new episodes every Monday through Friday as part of the Locked On Podcast Network.